بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين. اللهم ربنا أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم أرنا حقائق الأشياء كما هي. ربنا زدنا علما وعملا وإخلاصا يا رب العالمين. اللهم أرنا حقائق الأشياء كما هي. اللهم أرنا حقائق الأشياء كما هي. اللهم أرنا حقائق الأشياء كما هي. ربنا اللهم انصر أولياءك في غزة وفي الضفة في لبنان وفي اليمن وفي العراق وفي إيران وفي مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم انصرهم على عدوك وعدوهم إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم انصرهم نصرا عزيزا موقرا. اللهم فرج عنا وعن عبادك في غزة وفي الضفة وفي فلسطين كلها وفي اليمن وفي لبنان وفي مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم انصرهم في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم نفس كربنا وكربهم وثبت أقدامنا وأقدامهم والطف بنا وبهم يا أرحم الراحمين يا رب العالمين. آمين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وذريته وأصحابه وأزواجه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. So starting from here, according to Professor Whitehead, nature. Let's rub this off. According to Professor Whitehead, nature is not a static fact situated in an adynamic void. So that's why he's so concerned about space, because apparently, obviously, in some way, Newton's absolute space is stationary. So according to so there's nothing stationary as such. So in a sense, Iqbal is very Heraclitean, which is understandable because he was hugely influenced by not only Hegel but also Nietzsche. According to Professor Whitehead, and also obviously a lot of it is a reaction to imperialism, his own situation, and one of the it's a bit of a digression, but it might be useful. So imperialism or colonialism, to be specific, in India obviously influenced Iqbal, and people wondered about the reasons for the defeat of Muslims, for example, in India, and their succumbing to colonialism. And one of the obviously there were many diagnoses, but one of the diagnoses was that we had become static. That's one of Iqbal's theme in his poetry as well, static. Content in a wrong way due to a wrong interpretation of Islam, which came through various sources. One was Hinduism, influence of Hinduism, non-Islamic Iranian, Persian influences, especially in apparently Tasawwuf, combined with Hindu asceticism, preached fleeing from the world, preached seclusion, inactivity, abandonment of jihad, etc. Uh, all of which is, partially true, but not in the way it was exaggerated. So they went the other way. Action in itself, power, accumulating power. That was the panacea, a dynamic version of Islam, fight against imperialism, etc. So, as a philosopher, Iqbal also provides a metaphysical foundation for that. So he says quite, not uncritically, but quite, he's attracted to dynamic philosophies in the West. So, for example, Whitehead, process philosophy, Hegel, history, and movement, nature, power, struggle, power, um, and things like that, and criticize everything which goes the other way, which emphasizes, so it's against Parmenidean, otherworldly, Platonic influences in that sense. So hence the critique of Zeno, and hence the critique of Newton's stationary absolute space, etc. So that's sort of the context. So according to Professor Whitehead, therefore, so what's the significance of therefore here? It means, it seems like he is drawing a conclusion from what he said above. I'm not sure whether he can, because what he said was a piece of matter has become not a persistent thing with varying states, but a system of interrelated events. And events obviously are not stationary. And then he says, obviously Russell is saying here, but he is accepting that the old solidity has gone. Everything is in flux, a la Heraclitus. Therefore, nature is not a static fact. Nature is something dynamic, something incomplete in a sense. That's how he interpreted a lot of Quranic verses. And it's emphasized in his here in Reconstruction as well as in poetry. So according to Professor Whitehead, therefore, nature is not a static fact situated in an adynamic void. So here we can see why he is against, partially anyway, against Newton's absolute space, because in his mind, absolute space, absolute space implies or gives birth to a static universe, a solid universe in which matter is solid, and hence pitted against non-matter or mind. Hence the dualism, and that dualism sort of inhibits a lot of things. One of them is continuity, one of them is flow, dynamism, etc. So, according to Professor White, therefore, nature is not a static fact situated in an adynamic void, but a structure of events possessing the character of a continuous creative flow. There you go. Whitehead's process philosophy. That's why he's attracted to that, which of event possessing the character of a continuous creative flow, which which thought cuts up into isolated, immobile. Out of the mutual relation arise the concept of space and time. So what the actuality of universe is dynamic, continuous, creative flow. It's a continuous creation. It is our thought which actually imposes this stability on the universe, this monotony, this seeming static, seeming stability on the universe, which in a sense is correct, but obviously is going beyond what is, for example. Obviously, it's also compatible with Kantian view of universe. But as we'll see, he's also so in a sense, he obviously these are just lectures. So he's talking about a lot of things without going into its details. So we can't criticize him on that account, but he at this point he has a thesis which I just described, but he's bringing various philosophies, various scientific dimensions, theories in order to support that, without caring much about whether those various arguments which he's bringing in to prove or to establish his point or to convince us of his view are mutually compatible or not. I'm not saying they are not, but similarly, for example, this seems like it can be compatible with Kantian view here, but how is it compatible with Hegelian view, which is his basic framework, to which he will come back? Thought and matter are actually not opposed to each other. I'm sure you can reconcile all those things, but if thought and nature are similar, then why thought is the one which is producing, which is imposing stability and continuity on something which is basically stability and discontinuity on something which is continuous and which is flowing, etc. You can also think of, we might think that our thought is actually which is continuous and flowing and all that. It is the reality which is imposing static fact or discontinuity on our thought. So yeah. Okay, so let's go back. According to Professor Whitehead, therefore, nature is not a static fact situated in an adynamic void, but a structure of events possessing the character of a continuous creative flow which thought cuts up into isolated immobilities, out of whose mutual relation arise the concept of space and time. So space and space and time, and the and our dichotomy between space and time is the creation of our thought, which in a sense is very Kantian. So there is And obviously, Hegel built on Kant as well, but also reacts against Kant. But here, what he's saying, as I said, goes against his Alamikbal's basic Hegelian framework in a way, which is not to say that it is incompatible, but on the face of it, I mentioned the sort of contradiction which I see there, or at least incompatibility or tension. That's a proper word, I guess. Okay, thus we see how modern science, which is sort of built on a Kantian framework, I guess, uttered its agreement with Berkeley's criticism, modern science, like non-Newtonian science, I guess, uttered its agreement with Berkeley's criticism, which it once regarded as an attack on its very foundation. Here, Allama Iqbal is sort of thinking, I don't know, whether philosophical criticisms actually, I mean, I'm sure they affect scientists because they are educated in the same institutions where philosophy is being produced, and vice versa. But ultimately, science is a practice, and theorizations come afterwards. And whether that practice is affected by Berkeley's criticism or not, I'm not sure. I mean, at some point it is, but at a basic scientific practice level, that effect is not that stark, or it's not that immediate, at least. But Allama Iqbal seems to think otherwise. Thus, we see how modern science utters its agreement with Berkeley's criticism, which it once regarded as an attack on its very foundation. The scientific view of nature as pure materiality is associated with the Newton view of space and an absolute void. See? So materialism in Allama Iqbal's mind goes with absolute. That's why he's so much pure materiality, which means that matter is totally opposite to and separate in nature from mind, in which things are situated. So if pure materiality is situated in absolute void, then obviously you will get discontinuity and all that. This attitude of science has no doubt ensured a speedy progress. Why? Because obviously abstraction is very important for science. Here he might be correct in the sense that science and this might be actually also against some of the things he has said earlier about science and its nature. Again, I'm not saying that's contradiction, but there are tensions. So in here, Allama Iqbal realizes that science is actually science is based on abstraction. It abstracts from the context of our experience. So science is based on controlled experience in that sense. And that controlled experience requires abstraction. So the scientific worldview is an abstraction. But when we regard, and it's fine, but when we regard it, according to Iqbal here, that abstraction as the actual description of reality and base our general metaphysical picture on that and our worldview on that, that's when the problem arises, I think. So the attitude of science has no doubt ensures speedy progress, but the bifurcation of the total experience into opposite domains of mind and matter has today forced it, that's science, or at least the philosophies of science, in view of its own domestic difficulties, consider the problem which in the beginning was created completely ignored. The criticism of the foundation of the matter has fully disclosed that the hypothesis of pure materiality and ensuring it in its space is unworkable. I don't think the domestic difficulties belong to science as such, at least not immediately. They are the difficulties of the philosophers and philosophies of science. A physicist, when they jump from one view to the other, that's because they have new data which they can't explain through their erstwhile theory, so they have to update them. So that's where domestic difficulties of science or physics comes in. So we must distinguish between domestic difficulties of philosophy of science and philosophers and domestic difficulties of science or physics as such. Anyway, I think we should stop here because we need to re-engage with this passage. That's just the basic reading of this passage or part of this passage. We'll continue this inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Sallu wa sallim ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa azwajihi wa dhurriyyatihi ajma'in bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin.